Hello, I'm back again with the second half of Chapter 5 of Margaret Singer's Cults in Our Midst. I would like to remind everyone I am not an authority on the subject of cults, just a guy who is doing his best to apply the principles of Margaret Singer's book to the practices of Scientology. And I also need to remind you that I am not a mental health professional and I am speaking in my own opinion. I want to take a minute to offer a quick reminder here. In the last part of Chapter 3, I mentioned Singer had criteria for thought reform, and I just wanted to mention a few of them again. The first one was keep the person unaware of the agenda to control or change a person. And if you remember the car salesman we talked about in the first half of this chapter, when it was discussed that Hubbard suggested the use of 8C, and since I have uploaded the first half of the chapter, I have discovered a glossary from the terms contained in the dissemination materials. As you see here, the definition is not only used for the name of the type of control, it is also used in the term used for applying the control of a person, as well as the process of getting a person into a state of control. When calling these processes sales tricks and come-ons in the dissemination recruiting materials, I think that you would have a difficult time trying to argue that the methods are not to keep the recruit unaware. And number 2, control a person's time and environment. Throughout the materials, Hubbard kept coming back to selling the books, getting them in people's hands and using libraries to do it. Getting people out of their house and into a library, if not an org, is controlling their environment. Reading them alone is control of a person's time, especially if they are doing it on your suggestion. For example, Hubbard writes, no matter what you do with an organization, no matter how much writing of letters you do, the dissemination success of a group will not accomplish any security unless books are distributed. And continues, later in the same letter, if you think you can interest a person in Scientology and yet avoid your responsibility in getting him or her to read books on the subject, you are wasting a tremendous amount of effort. April of 1960, HCO Bulletin. Hubbard says that it is also imperative to let people know when they have had a breakthrough, or it may go unnoticed. This, in my opinion, can border on love bombing, or at least have the same effect. It certainly seems to me that this process is designed to inflate a person's ego when you act or think in the recommended way. The surprising thing to me was how openly Hubbard instructed people to stretch the truth, if not just plain lie, when he is often quoted as saying that Scientologists are the most ethical people in the world. I found what I believe to be the answer from the April 1960 letter when he wrote, and I quote, "Now the time for us has come to realize that there are very close to 2.5 billion people on this planet who are mentally illiterate. They do not know what makes them tick. They have no concept whatsoever of the bias of the human reaction. They are intolerant. They are at war with one another. They follow strange leaders and wind up in strange places. They have no hope that anything will ever dig them out. Only a minute percentage of these people have been introduced to Dianetics, the modern science of mental health." End quote. It seems to me from that quote that Hubbard was trying to convey that only the people that have found enlightenment from his work were the ones worthy of being told the truth. And withholding the truth from the unenlightened seems to be what he thinks is the ethical thing to do. I particularly find this hypocritical because of the paragraph before it, where he implies that he has been making clears or enlightened people for the last 13 years. That was 1960. 13 years prior, Hubbard wrote this letter to the Veterans Administration seeking help for his own mental state, and I quote, "After 2 years of trying and failing to regain my equilibrium in civil life, I am utterly unable to approach anything like my own competence. My last physician informed me that it might be very helpful if I were to be examined and perhaps treated psychiatrically or even by a psychoanalyst." End quote. Hubbard believes the best way to gain new members was through two-way communication, and through the use of two-way control he suggests when people are trying to quote-unquote sell Scientology to their friends, to demonstrate good and bad control to let them know that control is not always horrible, and the idea that overts lead to more overts, and if you can get people to mention their own overts, that person will be more willing to talk to you. He then suggested get your friends to read his books, and he assured everyone that it was within their grasp when he said, quote, "You could change everyone you know with this. Fumble around with it a bit. Get some practice. Get expert. You could do more for your community doing this than any other single activity." End quote. He went on to use the false system of logic that Singer mentioned in her criteria for thought reform. If you fail to interest people with this, it is only because they are too far gone, he explains in his HCOB letter of April 1960. In all honesty, I have to say I did not read through the entire dissemination course. However, the parts I have shared are from the standalone documents and letters that I have read completely. It certainly seems to me, in order to express what he wanted others to do, to suck new members into his fold, is the same thing he was deceptively doing to them. That is, offering them gains and giving them no real reward. It seems to me that Hubbard's greatest talent was to interest people, communicate help to them in order to control them. And Hubbard's famous words, when he boldly stated the only way to control people is to lie to them, and suggested that his students write that down in big letters, seems to label him as the snake oil salesman of the 20th century. And what Hubbard called a bridge to total freedom, I have to consider a labyrinth of self-destruction. Thanks a lot for listening. I'm Mr. Fide.